In a partial victory for Algeria's protest movement, the Constitutional Council scraps the controversial presidential poll that was planned for July 4th, citing a lack of valid candidates. The army calls on political parties and protesters to discuss a way out of the crisis. Days before the event's 30th anniversary, China makes a rare public acknowledgement of the Tiananmen crackdown on student protesters, but only to defend the bloody oppression as having been the, quote, correct policy. And responding to rocket fire on the occupied Golan Heights, Israel carries out airstrikes on neighbouring Syria, reportedly killing at least 10 people, including 3 Syrian soldiers and 7 foreign fighters. Thank you for watching France 24. I'm Nadia Sharbi. Algeria's Constitutional Council says the country cannot hold the presidential election planned for July 4th due to a lack of valid candidates. This Sunday's announcement follows mass demonstrations calling for the poll to be postponed so as to ensure a veritable transition of power following the resignation of longtime President Abdelaziz Bouteflika 2 months ago. But while it marks a victory for the opposition, the move will also likely extend the rule of interim President Abdelkader Ben Salah, who was meant to stay on only until the poll and is widely rejected as prolonging the dominance of the Bouteflika-era elite. Well, for the latest on these developments, let's cross to our Algiers correspondent, Monsef Aid Kassi. Hello, thank you very much for being with us. What's the reaction been to this announcement?
Hello. Well, the reactions at the moment are rather positive. The people obtained a new victory after having prevented the 5th term and put an end to 20 years of Bouteflika's reign. So for today, we think that it is important to remember that it's the Algerian people who decided, outside the constitutional or political framework, to postpone these elections by taking to the streets all over Algeria every Friday and even Tuesday for the students expressing their rejection of this vote. However, people on social media talk about a government called illegitimate, which wasted a lot of time for Algerians because it could have announced this postponement long before. So just to give you an example, the students were on the streets today, even before learning this news. They were once again repressed by the police while demanding the cancellation of the presidential election.
And no new date has been put forward for the election, so what happens next?
Well, I can give you, I can answer to this question by talking about these other big reaction this Sunday revolves around the fact that it is up to the head of state to reconvene the electoral body and complete the electoral process until the election of the president of the republic and the taking of the constitutional oath. So by this, we understand that Ben Salah, interim president, will not leave soon, while one of the main demands of the street, the establishment of transitional procedures, is therefore again rejected. So this time in a formal way. Finally, we don't know what is going to happen next and what is going to be the next step, but there are some positive and sometimes negative reactions, like the fear that is beginning to be felt. The new convocation of the electoral body, if it's issued by the same Ben Salah, risks leading to the cancellation of the vote for the 3rd time.
Monsef Aid Kassi reporting there from Algiers. Thank you very much for that update. In other world news, addressing journalists and academics at a security forum in Singapore this Sunday, China's defense minister made a rare public acknowledgement of the deadly Tiananmen crackdown on student protesters just days before its 30th anniversary. But the minister only mentioned the event to defend it as having been the correct policy. Valérie Decamp reports.
A man facing a tank. These images marked China's history, and yet few in the country dared to mention the Tiananmen protests. On June 4th, 1989, Chinese troops opened fire on peaceful demonstrators demanding democratic changes. 30 years later, references to Tiananmen are strictly censored in mainland China. That's why many were caught by surprise when China's defense minister acknowledged the events of June 4th at a security forum in Singapore.
Will the PLA this year finally recognize what happened back then?
Do you think the government was wrong with the handling of June 4th? There was a conclusion to that incident. It was political turmoil the central government needed to quell. The government was decisive in stopping the turbulence. That was the correct policy.
The government says 300 people lost their lives, but according to initial figures shared by the Red Cross, 2,600 people died on June 4th. From Taiwan, where pro-democracy leaders sought shelter, to the U.S., Chinese activists are commemorating the Tiananmen massacre ahead of its 30-year anniversary next Tuesday.
Every year, I come to the anniversary memorial event. So I always said it's our responsibility to remember them and also work to improve the situation in China.
According to some NGOs, several human rights activists have been arrested in China ahead of the June 4th anniversary, while many websites have already been shut down.
Clashes broke out this Sunday at the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound in Jerusalem, with Israeli police using bullets and pepper spray against Palestinian worshippers angered at Jewish visits to the highly sensitive holy site. The unrest came about as an Israeli holiday coincided with the final days of the Muslim holy month of Ramadan. At least 2 people were arrested, and police officials say calm has now returned to the area. Meanwhile, Israel carried out airstrikes in Syria this Sunday in response to rare rocket fire from the neighbouring country, with the Monitor reporting 10 killed, including Syrian soldiers and foreign fighters. Claire Muffson and Bilal Tarabe have the details.
An explosion lights the sky southwest of Damascus. These points of light are Israeli missiles fired late Saturday and early Sunday. The Syrian army says its air defenses intercepted some missiles coming from the Golan Heights. This footage, provided by the Israeli army, shows a missile striking Khan al-Shiz southwest of Damascus. Israel attacked Syrian army targets in the capital region and in Quneitra in the south. The missiles fired from the Golan Heights hit several Syrian army outposts, killing at least 3 soldiers. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ordered the missiles launched after 2 rockets were fired from Syria towards the Golan Heights on Saturday.
Yesterday, 2 missiles were fired toward Israel from Syrian territory. One struck inside Syria, and the other hit our territory on the Golan Heights. I held security consultations following the attack, and I ordered the IDF to take strong action, which it did, striking several targets. We will not tolerate firing at our territory, and we will respond with great force to any aggression against us. This has been the consistent policy that I have led, together with the government, and this is what we will continue to do for the security of Israel.
Israel has launched hundreds of airstrikes on Syrian territory since the war began in 2011. The most recent missiles targeted military outposts serving as bases for allies of the Syrian regime, including Iranian forces and Hezbollah fighters. The Shiite militia wants Israel to leave the Golan Heights, the Syrian territory Israel annexed in 1981. The U.S. recently recognized Israeli sovereignty there, cranking up tensions.
Following weeks of escalating tensions with Tehran, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo appeared to somewhat soften his stance over Iran this Sunday. Speaking in Switzerland, the U.S. diplomacy chief told reporters that Washington was ready to talk with Tehran, quote, with no preconditions. However, he stopped short of any indication that the lifting of sanctions over Iran's nuclear program could be on the table. Let's take a listen to a clip of his remarks.
We're prepared to engage in a conversation with no preconditions. We're ready to sit down with them. But the American effort to fundamentally reverse the malign activity of this Islamic Republic, this revolutionary force, is going to continue.
While responding to those comments, Tehran has ruled out talks with Washington unless it changes its, quote, general behaviour and actions. More protests and a return of the infamous orange baby blimp. US President Donald Trump could be getting a sense of déjà vu as he arrives for his second official visit to the UK on Monday, a trip that's shaping up to be just as controversial as his first in July of last year. This time around, Trump has sparked outrage with interviews to the British press, in which he's weighed in on issues ranging from Brexit to the Duchess of Sussex. Claire Muffson has more.
Wading once again into Britain's domestic affairs. President Donald Trump told the British press that the UK should walk away from negotiations with Brussels and refuse to pay the €45 billion divorce bill. Trump also endorsed former Foreign Minister Boris Johnson to take Theresa May's place when she steps down later this week. The comments come as Britain prepares to roll out the red carpet for the Trumps on Monday, starting with a private lunch with the Queen and a state banquet. Britain's future trading relationship with the US will be crucial to its post-Brexit success. But the state visit, which coincides with the anniversary of the D-Day landings, is proving deeply divisive.
There are other close allies coming for the commemorations. They're not getting a state visit, a state banquet costing millions of pounds. And my point is this, some of the things Donald Trump has done over the last 2-3 years, Londoners find abhorrent and offensive. Well, I think it's right and proper that Londoners and those from around the country who've got concerns around Donald Trump should protest.
Visiting in July of last year, the US president was met with a giant Trump baby blimp and massive demonstrations. This time, some of the trappings of a state visit, like a carriage ride to Buckingham Palace, are likely to be scaled back. Authorities fear they make an irresistible target for protesters.
A Brazilian woman is accusing football star Neymar of rape. The two had exchanged on social media before the Paris Saint-Germain player sent her a plane ticket to the French capital, where they met at a hotel. Neymar denies the allegations and says the case is no more than an extortion attempt. Shirley Sibon explains.
This discussion on a social media is how Brazilian football player Neymar met his accuser, a Brazilian woman who wants to remain anonymous. Neymar has released their exchange to try and prove he did not rape her. On the 15th of May, 2 months after their first contact online, the football player invited the woman to Paris, where he plays with Paris Saint-Germain. They met at a hotel room near the Champs-Élysées. That's when the alleged victim says Neymar raped her. The woman didn't file a complaint in France, but waited until she went back to Sao Paulo 2 days later. Neymar took to Twitter to deny the allegation.
It's painful. But since I'm in this situation, I'll explain everything. I hope it will be cleared up. You can just look at the messages and you'll know what happened. It was a trap, and I fell into it. I'll learn the lesson.
Neymar says he has been the victim of an attempted extortion. The case comes after a series of problems for the star. He was banned for 3 games after slapping a supporter of a rival team and stripped last month of Brazil's national team's captaincy. Injury has also kept him away from the field for much of the season.
And finally, at least 4 tourists were slightly injured and many more left running for their lives in Venice this Sunday morning as a towering cruise ship lost control, crashing into the wharf and hitting a much smaller luxury sightseeing boat, this after suffering an engine failure. Well, the amateur footage you're seeing there shows the 13-deck MSC Opera scraping along the dockside, its engine blaring before knocking into the tourist boat. The accident has sparked new calls for placing restrictions on cruise ships in the stunning but strained tourist city. Opponents say the cruise ships are out of scale, cause pollution and endanger the lagoon's already fragile ecosystem. And you can hardly see Venice there in the background. Well, that's where we're leaving this edition. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to France 24.